Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shujar, and these are the headlines. NATO allies have agreed to start withdrawing troops from Afghanistan on the 1st of May. They said all foreign troops will pull out from the country by the 11th of September. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said it is now up to Afghanistan to secure peace. Meanwhile, the United States said it will look to continue funding key Afghan security force capabilities even after withdrawal. This comes after President Joe Biden announced to end America's longest war. The global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 138 million, while the death toll is approaching 3 million. India has registered its biggest ever single-day spike with over 200,000 fresh infections as its caseload has topped 14 million. In Pakistan, 118 more people died and over 5,400 tested positive overnight. In Yemen, Arab coalition says it has destroyed 5 ballistic missiles and 4 explosive-laden drones launched by the Houthis towards Saudi Arabia. In a statement, the coalition said all strikes attempted to target the southern Saudi city of Jazan, but the Houthis claim they have hit Saudi's Aramco oil facility, a Patriot anti-missile structure, and other targets in Jazan. In Myanmar, several people are injured after security forces opened fire on a pro-democracy protest by medical workers in the city of Mandalay. Witnesses say deaths are feared as the number of civilians killed since the first February coup near 750. Meanwhile, the government forces have suffered heavy casualties in an assault on ethnic Kachin forces in the north. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. NATO allies have agreed to start withdrawing troops from Afghanistan on the 1st of May. They said all foreign troops will pull out from the country by the 11th of September. This comes after U.S. President Joe Biden announced to end America's longest war. After 2 decades into the war on terror that cost the lives of 2,400 American service members and consumed an estimated $2 trillion, the United States and its allies have decided it is finally time for their troops to leave Afghanistan. Speaking alongside U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in Brussels, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said it is now up to Afghanistan to secure peace.
This is not the end of our relationship with Afghanistan, but rather the start of a new chapter. NATO allies and partners will continue to stand with the Afghan people. But it's now for the Afghan people to build a sustainable peace.
The NATO mission comprises around 2,500 U.S., while 7,000 non-U.S. troops. UK Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said Britain will support an orderly pullout, whilst building up Afghanistan's capacity for self-governance and continuing counterterrorism support to protect the gains made in the war-torn country. The United States also says it will look to continue funding key Afghan security forces capability, even after withdrawal. Earlier announcing an end to the war, President Joe Biden said it is time for U.S. troops to come home.
After consulting closely with our allies and partners, with our military leaders and intelligence personnel, with our diplomats and our development experts, with the Congress and the Vice President, as well as with Mr. Ghani and many others around the world, I've concluded that it's time to end America's longest war. It's time for American troops to come home.
The developments come after the Taliban said they will not participate in any future peace talks unless the foreign forces leave Afghanistan. For more on this, we are joined by Mr. Brahimullah Yousafzai, a senior analyst from Peshawar. Thank you so much for your time. Now, the United States and NATO allies have announced their pullout from Afghanistan by the 11th of September, ending their 2-decade-long war. Can this help bring the Taliban back to negotiations, who have boycotted peace talks until complete withdrawal of the foreign forces?
I think the U.S. and its allies would now try to persuade the Taliban to attend the peace conference in Istanbul, which is likely to begin on 24th of April for 10 days. Taliban have already declared that they would not join or attend any peace conference, including the one in Istanbul, if there are still foreign troops in Afghanistan. That's a very tough position Taliban have taken, and they earlier had warned they will resume their attacks against the foreign forces. So, in a way, the U.S. has violated the Doha Treaty, which they signed with Taliban last year in February. They have given themselves 4 months and 1 week extra to withdraw, and it's an unconditional withdrawal. They are not asking anything more from Taliban, but in a way, I think that Taliban would have to be persuaded, satisfied, not only directly by the U.S., but also by its, those countries which are close to Taliban, like Qatar, Pakistan, China, Russia, Iran. So let's see how it goes. But right now, the situation has become very confused and uncertain.
Now, Mr. Rahimullah, do you think the Afghan forces are capable of handling the war-torn country's security after withdrawal of the foreign forces?
If you listen to President Ashraf Ghani and his ministers, they say they are fully capable of defending the country. But if you listen to the U.S. military commander and security analysts, they say this government will not be able to survive for long. Ashraf Ghani is also on record saying that if there is no foreign military assistance for his country for 6 months, then his military will collapse. So we have these different viewpoints regarding the capabilities of the Afghan government, but there has been a lot of, casualties. 45,000 Afghan security personnel, according to Ashraf Ghani, were killed in the last 5 years. But I think that, they're still holding out. They're controlling all the major cities. They're controlling all the borders. Taliban are dominant in the rural areas, but in the urban areas where 65% of the population lives, those cities, urban areas are controlled by the Afghan government.
Mr. Rahimullah Yousafzai, thank you so much for speaking to Indus News. Now moving on, the global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 138 million, while the death toll is approaching 3 million. India has registered its biggest ever single-day spike with over 200,000 fresh infections as its caseload topped 14 million. As the COVID-19 variants continue to wreak havoc during the latest and most devastating wave of the pandemic, the administrative and technical glitches hamper vaccination drives across many nations. The United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has reported about 5,800 COVID-19 infections in people who were fully vaccinated. Meanwhile, experts have warned that Brazil's P1 variant behind the deadly surge in the country is mutating in ways that could make it more dangerous.
The P1 accumulating mutations in this region can make the situation increasingly similar to the South African region and more difficult to neutralize.
The latest wave is getting worse in Europe as well. Turkey has imposed another lockdown for the first 2 weeks of Ramadan as it reported its highest daily spike in infections. Portugal has extended the state of emergency for 15 days to control the pandemic. Sweden has paused the planned rollout of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. However, France has announced to continue the jab's use. Meanwhile, the European Union has announced to procure 50 million more Pfizer vaccines in the second quarter of 2021.
And this is why I'm pleased to announce that we have reached an agreement with BioNTech Pfizer to once again speed up the delivery of vaccines. 50 million additional doses of BioNTech Pfizer vaccines will be delivered in Q2 beginning in April.
In India, the latest wave of COVID-19 has prompted a new exodus as low-paid workers are starting to flee the cities en masse, just like a year ago. Meanwhile, Bangladesh has entered a week-long complete lockdown as new cases and deaths are hitting record highs. In Pakistan, 118 more people have lost their lives to COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the nationwide death toll has reached over 15,800. It said over 5,300 people have tested positive for the virus overnight, while the caseload has exceeded 739,000. The health ministry's data shows that there are currently more than 77,000 active cases in the country. The ministry says more than 646,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. Meanwhile, more than 5,100 patients are hospitalized across the country. In Yemen, the Arab coalition says it has destroyed 5 ballistic missiles and floor explosive laden drones launched by the Houthis towards Saudi Arabia. In a statement, the coalition said all strikes attempted to target the southern Saudi city of Jazan. The coalition says some debris from the intercepted drones fell in the Jazan University and caused a limited fire. But the Houthis claim they have hit Saudi Arabia's Aramco oil facility, a Patriot anti-missile structure, and other targets in Jazan. In a tweet, Houthi spokesperson said the strike on the oil facility set it on fire. In northern Iraq, a drone has targeted the U.S. forces stationed in Erbil International Airport. The Interior Ministry of Iraq's autonomous Kurdistan government said no one was hurt in the attack. It said the drone dropped the explosives near the airport. Meanwhile, Ankara said a separate rocket attack has killed a Turkish soldier in northern Iraq. The defense ministry said one of the 3 rockets launched towards Turkish military base in Bashka region hits its target. No group has claimed responsibility for any of the attacks so far. In Myanmar, several people are injured after security forces opened fire on a pro-democracy protest by medical workers in the city of Mandalay. Witnesses say deaths are feared as the number of civilians killed since the first February coup near 750. Local media said security forces also arrested some medical workers who have been at the forefront of the anti-military coup campaign. Yesterday, the pro-democracy activists splashed red paint on roads and buildings to represent the blood of the killed protesters. Meanwhile, the government forces have suffered heavy casualties in an assault on ethnic Kachin forces in the north. The Kachin Independence Army has claimed killing around 100 troops during the fighting over the past 24 hours. Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan has strongly criticized Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi for calling him a dictator. Erdogan said Draghi's statement was a total impertinence and disrespect. The Turkish president said Draghi has unfortunately torpedoed the bilateral ties. Erdogan added the Italian Prime Minister was appointed and not elected. He suggested Draghi lacked the democratic legitimacy to make such criticism. Draghi did not come to power in an election, but was drafted in by Italy's president in February to head a new government. Last week, Draghi said Erdogan had humiliated European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen during her visit to Ankara. He said it was important to be frank with dictators. Greek Foreign Minister Nikos Dendias is set to arrive in Ankara for a meeting with his Turkish counterpart Mevlut Cavusoglu. Dendias was due in Ankara on Wednesday, but changed his plans because of a video conference between NATO ministers. During a brief visit to Turkey, Dendias met with the Christian EU Municipal Patriarch in Istanbul. Today's meeting is aimed at paving the way for a future summit between the top leadership of the two countries. Earlier, Dendias said the two sides will seek common grounds to resolve their dispute. Meanwhile, Greece says it has agreed with Libya to resume talks over the maritime border demarcation. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said this after a meeting with the president of the Libyan Presidential Council in Athens. Turkey has hailed the start of a new era with Egypt as Ankara pushes ahead to normalize ties with Cairo. Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu says a meeting might be held between the two countries at the deputy foreign minister's level. Speaking to the media, he added that a date has not yet been set. The foreign minister said the appointment of ambassadors will also come up on the agenda during the talks. He also hinted the future meeting between himself and his Egyptian counterpart. The two sides broke off relations after 2013 ouster of then-President Mohamed Morsi, who was backed by Ankara. Amnesty International has called for an international investigation in human rights violations in Ethiopia's Tigray region. The rights body said Eritrean forces killed 3 civilians in Tigray on the 12th of April. In a statement, it said at least 19 others were injured after Eritrean troops suddenly opened fire at the town in Adwa people. It added that a probe must be carried out in this and other incidents, including war crimes. Amnesty's East Africa Deputy Director Sarah Jackson said deliberate attacks on civilians are prohibited by international law. This comes more than 2 weeks after Ethiopia announced that Eritrea will withdraw its forces from Tigray. Egypt has appealed to the UN to stop Ethiopia from acting unilaterally over the Nile Dam mega project. In a phone call, the UN chief, Cairo's foreign minister, said that the second filling of the dam will hamper the stability and security of the region. Sami Shokri called upon the UN to contribute towards resuming the negotiations and reaching a deal. Meanwhile, Sudan has invited both Egypt and Ethiopia to a closed-door meeting to discuss the long-running dispute. Premier Abdullah Hamdok's office said reaching a deal before the start of the dam's operation is an urgent matter. Last week, talks involving the 3 countries hosted by the African Union failed to reach an agreement over the operation of the dam. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. In the United States, defense witnesses continue to testify in favor of Derek Chauvin at the George Floyd murder trial. A medical expert says he believes Floyd's death occurred from erratic heartbeats caused by his cardiac disease. Talking to the jury, Dr. David Flower disputed findings that police restraining starved Floyd's body of oxygen. Fowler said exhaust fumes from the nearby police car may have also contributed to Floyd's death.
You would have the toxicology, the fentanyl and methamphetamine. There is exposure to a vehicle exhaust, so potentially carbon monoxide poisoning, or at least an effect from increased carbon monoxide in his bloodstream, and paraganglionoma, or the other natural disease process that he has. So all of those combined to cause Mr. Floyd's death.
The police veteran Chauvin has pleaded not guilty to murder and manslaughter charges. Now moving on, Russia says it may resume cross-border shipment with North Korea soon. Russia's ambassador in Pyongyang, Alexander Matsigora, said there is no famine in North Korea, but life is difficult. In an interview, he said the economic strife in North Korea is bad, but not as bad as the 1990s depression. Matsigora said the resumption of the 6-party multilateral dialogue for denuclearization is not only possible, but also inevitable. He said the Russian-Chinese roadmap for Korean settlement at its final stage provides the launch of multilateral negotiations. This, he said, will form a regional security system with the participation of all interested parties. The Russian ambassador is one of the very few ambassadors left in office in North Korea. Stocks in the Asia-Pacific are trading mixed after Wall Street retreated from a record high as major banks announced strong profits. The ASX 200 in Australia has gained the most, rising over 0.5%. Seoul's Kospi added close to 0.5%, while Japan's Nikkei 225 also edged up fractionally. However, shares in mainland China and the Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong have dipped close to 1%. It's now time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us at our social media at Indus.News.